Familiar, yet full of surprises. Dolphins paying a visit. And bare islands. Polar ice meets a mini Sahara. All of this is the Baltic Sea. Between Denmark and the Baltics, sandy coasts attract mass tourism, as well as individual travelers and unusual beachcombers. The first episode takes us from Denmark's northern tip via the Darst Peninsula and the Curonian Spit to the endless beaches of Latvia. Tranquil, the Baltic Sea. For many, it doesn't deserve the title sea. But here too, the wind can cause high waves. The Baltic is different to other seas. An inland sea with salt water in the west and fresh water in the northeast. It is the youngest ocean in the world, evolved after the last ice age. To this day, wind and waves shape the shores. Transport sand, excoriated from the cliffs of the Ice Age. High dunes grow. And long sandy beaches that, via prevailing currents, especially characterize the west and southern regions of the Baltic. Like at Denmark's northernmost point near Skagen. There, a very special sandbank edges its way into the sea. This is the divide between Skagerrak and Kattegat, where the North Sea meets the Baltic. Seals come here to relax. Because tourists are also attracted to the sandbank between the seas, they prefer to give birth somewhere else. Due to the North Sea connection, the water here has a salt content of some 2%. It is clear and full of kelp forests. In the middle of the Kattegat, between Denmark and Sweden, is the island of Anholt. Since 1560, a lighthouse guides ships on their way. Morten Arbudström is a ranger on Anholt, the only place in Denmark from where one can observe seals from land. Even though it is only with binoculars. Centuries of being hunted has made the seals shy. This is why they now meet on a sandbank on the east side of the island. Mid-June, the mothers give birth to one pup respectively, each weighing in at around 10 kilograms. Mothers suckle their young for 5 weeks. The milk has a fat content of some 45%. More than 10 times that of cow's milk. A real-life energy drink. The birds are in for a treat. The placenta is a feast. Just ask any seagull. With more than 1,000 animals, the seal colony on Anholt is the largest in the Baltics. In order to produce sufficient milk, the mother has to keep leaving her young and go hunting in the sea for fish. The seal babies spent most of their time together in a makeshift kindergarten. But every 3 to 4 hours, their enormous appetite for fresh milk awakes. Then they call for their mother. Here they risk being caught in the crossfire. On her return, the mother too searches for her offspring. She recognizes him by his smell and his voice, amongst roughly 500 other babies on Anholt. The other mothers send the little one packing, as they will only suckle their own baby. Which means continuing the search and repeated calls to the mother. At last, she has recognized the familiar voice. And greets her baby before she gives him anything to eat. While one can only observe the family life of the timid seals on Anholt from a distance, beachcombers run the risk of stumbling over the nurseries of other animals. The chicks of the common ringed plover just duck their heads to the ground, fully trusting that they are then invisible to others. So as not to betray the chick's location, the parents land a short distance away before they quietly approach to warm the chicks beneath their wing feathers. Little terns breed in just a few areas along the Baltic Sea. The chicks are rarely larger than a matchbox, the parents lighter than half a bar of chocolate. As pretty as they may be, once they sit in a debris trough, the little terns are masterfully camouflaged. As a rule, they hatch 2 to 3 eggs, and this mostly undisturbed, as 90% of the island of Anholt is under nature conservation. Unlike the North Sea, tides are virtually non-existent in the Baltic. This is why the beaches are not flooded twice a day. For the young seals, this means a continually dry nursery. Despite the fact that they can swim from the day they were born. The mothers eventually lure the little ones into the sea. And even if some of them spend their time on the backs of their mothers, the young animals must soon be independent. 5 weeks after their birth, and the young already weigh almost 30 kilograms. They will need the fat reserves too, then when the mother leaves them. There is nothing they can do other than to catch fish themselves. And this doesn't happen right away. Seals can spend up to half an hour underwater, but their dives rarely last more than 5 or 6 minutes. Up to 8 centimeters of fat protect the seal against cooling. Once their coat has become wet, it no longer isolates them very well. Seals live almost only in the western Baltic Sea, a few of them off southern Sweden. Epidemics such as distemper have caused the deaths of thousands of the animals. Thanks to strict protection rules, their stocks have been replenished. Now, once again, some 16,000 seals inhabit the sandbanks. South of the Kattegat, straits, islands and bays limit the exchange with the North Sea. The water here contains less salt, and this is where the inland sea of the Baltic actually begins. The hills are moraines, deposits from glaciers of the Ice Age. Cliffs, like those on the island of Fyn, are derogations of similar hills. They're not made of sand, but clay, which is much firmer. A perfect foundation for sand martins. Each spring, Europe's smallest species of tern returns from their African winter quarters. The birds check whether the old holes are still nest-worthy. And they have to find a new partner, as the sand martin's breeding community lasts but one summer. Hollowed out side by side in the steep face, the burrows are inaccessible for nest robbers. The arm-long ducts rise toward the end to prevent rain from entering them. The nesting recess at the end of the burrow must now be made just a little cozier. The martins use seaweed and sometimes a few feathers with which to upholster the nest before they begin to lay 5 or 6 eggs there. In better years, they even breed a second time in the loamy cliffs of the Pleistocene. They make good pasture land and cropland. Additionally, the Danish island worlds offer ideal breeding and mating regions for waterfowl, such as shelducks and redshanks. In the shallow shore areas, the male scuttles, thereby courting the female. While the common ringed plovers argue over the best territory, the redshank has been successful in his endeavours. The pairing is an artistic balancing act. When the shelducks are overcome by spring fever, an entire horde of males, discernible by their red frontal tubercles above their beaks, pester a single female. The courtship consists of wild pursuits, attacks, sham fights, and even aerial combat. until a couple finally emerges. It's astonishing just how colourful both sexes are. The reason? It's unnecessary for the females to disguise themselves, because shell ducks lay their eggs protected in burrows, for example in old rabbit holes. The Storebelt, a sound. Most of the fresh water flows through here from the North Sea to the Baltic Sea. This is extremely important. A suspension bridge of some 18 kilometers in length connects the island of Fyn in Denmark's west with Sjælland in the east. Around 11,000 porpoises live between Kattegat and the Bay of Kiel. The world's smallest whales rarely achieve sizes in excess of 1.5 meters. From a distance and at first sight, they look like miniature dolphins. But they are more timid and difficult to observe, as they don't perform capers. Marine animals that require higher levels of salt live in this part of the Baltic Sea. In the depths, heavy, salty water flows out of the Kattegat southwards. This carries oxygen and is vital for the Baltic Sea to take a breath. And for a rich marine fauna, food for the porpoises that eat 6 to 8 kilograms daily, roughly 1/10 of their body weight. The mini whales are sensitive to noise. Noise from ships damages their hearing and banishes them from many regions. Unfortunately, noise from offshore wind turbines has the same effect. The Öresund Bridge connects Malmö in Sweden with Denmark's capital, Copenhagen. With Rosenborg Castle in the King's Garden, and Nyhavn Canal with its gabled houses. From here, the island of Møn lies to the south with its 6-kilometre-long steep walls of chalk. In places, the limestone wall is 128 metres tall, making it higher than the chalk formations on Rügen or even the cliffs of Dover. They host a very special attraction, the fastest bird in the world. Ever since the 70s, peregrine falcons no longer breed in Denmark. Then, in 2002 on Møn, a male falcon from Sweden met with a female falcon from Germany. Since then, they rear up to 4 young birds annually on the chalk cliffs. By nosediving at speeds of up to 300 kilometers an hour, they capture exhausted birds resting on the island coast. Once again, the female brings the prey to her young in the nesting place. A nibble here and there should be all right. But then the mother just flies off again, with the food. an educational measure for the almost fully grown young birds. They're big enough to leave the nest and become independent. In the meantime, peregrine falcons are also breeding again on the Danish islands of Bornholm and Sjælland. Just south of the Storebælt is the Bay of Kiel and the Fehmarnsund. In the hinterland, old farms and fields characterize the landscape. It's not only sailing boats that frolic in the far-reaching estuaries, better known as fjords. It was back in February 2016 when Stefan Thomsen, a professional diver with the Flensburg Fire Brigade, had a very special encounter. Two large dolphins approach him. Normally, the up to 4-meter-long mammals live in the North Sea and the Atlantic. But in the following weeks, the dolphins regularly meet with Thomsen and his colleagues and encircle the men in a curious yet friendly manner. In the media, the two dolphins are given the names Selfie and Delphi. They are two young, not completely grown-up males, apparently on an expedition in the Flensburg Fjord. Selfie and Delphi have been living in the Baltic Sea now for several months. They've also been sighted off the Swedish coast. There is more than enough fish for the dolphins to eat in the Baltic Sea, like herrings and cod. Thomsen has even been able to see how Selfie and Delphi whirl up silt to hunt for food under cover. Typical of dolphins, they love to accompany boats. Selfie and Delphi attract the inquisitive to the fjord, who are rewarded with unforgettable moments. It's unclear why dolphins have never made the Baltic Sea a long-term habitat. There is enough for them to eat, and as these two have proven, they can also survive the winter here. After 4 weeks off the coast of Schleswig-Holstein, the now famous couple swim toward Denmark. They are probably following shoals of fish, leaving the Baltic Sea behind them again. South of the fjord lies Dasso Bay and the Trave, which flows through Lübeck. The former centre of the Hanseatic League is known as the gateway to the north, from whence merchant cogs sailed to Scandinavia and the Baltic region. Eastward, along the Mecklenburg coast, break-off edges on the shores of the Baltic Sea. Narrow strips of sand, isthmuses and peninsulas, and behind them, lagoons, like the Salzhaf near Rerik. The long sandy beaches have made a popular holiday resort of the former fishing village of Warnemünde, with a ferry harbour and a beach promenade. A little further on the Das Peninsula. Waves spill into the forest and flush out the roots of trees until they fall, like here on the west beach of the peninsula. The Western Pomerania Lagoon Area National Park also comprises the lagoons in the east. Each autumn, the lagoons attract tens of thousands of cranes from Scandinavia and Eastern Europe. Before their flight to Spain, they top up their fat depots for the long journey ahead. To prevent cranes from ravaging already cultivated fields, however, the farmers distribute maize and wheat on harvested areas as a distraction. In contrast to storks, crane families make the trip southwards together. The young birds can be recognized by their brown heads. They search for food during the day. Before it gets dark, the large birds leave for their sleeping quarters. Their thousand-fold trumpeting can be heard for miles around. They gather by the shallow waters of the lagoon. At the easternmost area of the peninsula is one of the most important resting places for cranes in Central Europe. Sometimes up to 40,000 birds meet here at one time, protected by the national park. The cranes spend the night on grassy islands or by standing in knee-high waters. This protects them from attacks by foxes and the like while they're asleep. Not only cranes make their way to the Baltic Sea in the autumn, deer are also keen on a trip to the beach. Red deer, like these tagged ones, wander over 40 kilometers, from the islands of Rügen and Hiddensee to the westernmost point of the Das. The animals regularly switch back and forth between island and mainland. Their aim? The stag rut. Not in the forest, but in the reeds. Whilst wandering, they traverse offshore reed islands, crossing the Baltic Sea in doing so. The relatively shallow waters are no barrier for red deer. The coast is undergoing constant change. Currents, waves and winds cause it to continuously reshape. The mainland turns into exposed mudflats, sometimes more, sometimes less covered in water, but always shallow. And so finally, the red deer managed to meet at their traditional rutting ground in the dunes to the west of the peninsula. Hunting has been forbidden here since the founding of the national park in 1990, and this has changed the behavior of the deer. No sign of a timid king of the forest. The bellows of the deer echo around the reeds the entire day, a sound designed to impress the females and scare off any competition. Sometimes a threat is sufficient, and one surrenders. But there are times when the stag is challenged, and the situation leads to a duel just behind the dunes. Attentively eyed by the hinds. Originally, the red deer preferred the open range as a habitat. Hunting, road construction, and the absence of rest zones all forced the deer into the forest. On the Das in the autumn, one can observe them going about their business in their own natural way. The next morning, cranes too have early risers and sleepyheads. An hour passes by until the very last of them has flown off. Most of the animal visitors leave the national park by the beginning of November at the latest. Some wander back across the sea from whence they came. Others fly southwards for thousands of miles. Peace returns to the Das. In October 2015, a rare wanderer arrived in Mecklenburg Bay. A Sowerby's beaked whale, belonging to the least investigated of its kind. They normally live in the North Atlantic, sometimes in the North Sea. This 3.5-metre-long female has simply got lost. The whale keeps jumping out of the water, which is unusual. In contrast to dolphins, when beaked whales jump out of water, it is a sign of stress. Normally, in the open sea, they dive up to 1,000 meters deep to hunt for squids. The beaked whale never did find her way out of the shallow Baltic Sea. Weeks later, the female is found stranded in Sweden. Sadly, she simply died of starvation. Ordinarily, winters in the German Baltic Sea region are mild. But every 10 years, frost and snow have an icy cold grip on the land. Then the red deer find little food in the Das forest. They do have a dense winter coat, the fur being about double as long as it is in summer, with thick woolly hair underneath. But they still have to save energy. In times of hardship, deer can lower the body temperature of their limbs and reduce their pulse. Meanwhile, all exertion is on the back burner, the fat reserves conserved, and it's time to retreat to the peaceful woods of the national park. On the border to which, almost unchanged, are the old fishing villages of Born and Vik. The limestone cliffs on Rügen belong to the Jasmund National Park, the second one on the German sector of the Baltic Sea. Beech forests, where the black woodpecker builds his sleep caves, evolve on the chalky ground of which the cliffs are made. The primeval forests offer Europe's biggest woodpecker several opportunities. Spring causes the leaves to sprout, hundreds of thousands on old beech trees. Ever since Jasmund has been a national park, its beech forests are on the right road to becoming real jungles. The way in which they covered large parts of Europe for centuries. Since 2011, Jasmund, with the largest contiguous beech forest area on the Baltic coast, has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The old forests, with their large spaces between the trees, are ideal for the black woodpecker, with a wingspan of an imposing 70 centimetres. The typical call of the male and his completely red crest distinguish him from the female with a smaller red bonnet. The young in the cave have already heard the father coming. As baby food, he has brought them ants, wood-dwelling beetles and their larvae, which he finds in the uncultivated forests, where dead trees simply remain lying and decay. In the protected national park, the red deer, like on the Dars, are active during the day. At the end of the winter, the males have discarded their antlers. Now a new set is growing, covered with velvet skin. In the spring, they drift through the forest as if emulating a boy band. They won't become rivals again until the autumn. Some prefer the underground level of the forest. Badgers. The subterranean constructions can reach depths of up to 5 meters. Large families live in them, often several generations side by side. Badgers are normally timid and nocturnal. But in many areas of Jasmund, it is so quiet that they even come out with their offspring. A female badger can give birth to up to 6 cubs in one litter. The bigger ones are allowed to rummage through the forest for food with their parents. Badgers have extremely good noses. Although they are martens and are therefore also predators, apart from insects, worms and small mammals, they also eat roots, blossoms and fruit. but if they feel disturbed, they quickly disappear from the face of the earth. Not far from Königstuhl in Jasmund, just off Rügen, we find the conservation island of Fjords. Further east, the imperial resorts on Usedom, with the pier at Aalbeck, attract tourists. Just a few kilometers further, and Poland begins, with its secluded and pristine sandy beaches. With coastlines full of bays and lagoons, which provide primordial returnees a home. In the 14th century, bison were wiped out in western Pomerania, but in the 1980s, the wild cattle were once again settled just west of Stettin. Today, more than 80 bison roam here freely. The 11,000-hectare large national park Wollin, between the Baltic Sea and the River Oder Delta, has dedicated itself for decades to the protection of the wild cattle. Hope is indeed in sight for the kings of the forest. The sandy beaches and dunes that stretch from Poland to Lithuania seem endless. The most well-known dune can be found on the Curonian Spit, an almost 100-kilometre-long barrier of the finest sand between the Curonian Lagoon and the sea. The continual winds have piled up shifting sand dunes more than 70 meters high. This area was covered with forests until the early 17th century. After deforestation, nothing could stop the shifting sand. Sometimes a dune could wander 10 meters in the space of 3 to 4 days. Those that could dismantled their wooden dwellings and rebuilt them elsewhere. But the sand still buried 14 villages beneath it. The village of Nida disappeared twice in the sand masses. "200 years ago, it was decided to reforest the dunes and halt the advance of the sand. To this day, crosses in the sand betray the areas beneath which complete villages lie entombed. In the third carnation of the village of Nida, wooden triangular flags known as Kurrenwimpel have been turning in the wind since 1730. Once they were attached to the masts of the fishermen's boats. Today, the forest protects the village and harbour from the tall dunes, once again encircled by white-tailed eagles. Hunters and pollutants once caused them to disappear entirely from the region. The Curonian Spit is full of fish. The steep slopes of the dunes make a perfect lookout for the hunt, or to check whether someone else was successful. When white-tailed eagles and common ravens act like the best of friends, then there's a reason for it. A young eagle, resplendent in his nursery plumage, has found a dead fish on the beach. This attracts the hungry. Other young eagles. They may still be inexperienced in catching fish, but they know the art of dispute. The fight ends without any serious consequences. Thanks to strict protection rules, Lithuania's skies have 65 white-tailed eagles, many of them over the Curonian Spit. Further eastwards, on the unspoiled coasts of Latvia, bronze-hued rivers flow into the sea, tinged from the peat in the moors of the hinterland. The Gauja is the wildest and longest river in Latvia. It winds its way more than 450 kilometers deep into the forests of the country. The harbingers of the north live here. Moose appreciate cold winters and cool summers. This moose cow already has a calf, but her flanks still show traces of a winter coat. The calf is one of around 8,000 of the country's moose population. The west of Latvia is also known as Gotland. The numerous rivers from the German coast to here have sweetened the Baltic Sea. The water now contains less than 1% salt. The deserted beaches lead to Cape Kolka, Gotland's northernmost point. Here, the Baltic Sea and the Bay of Riga meet. Despite all of the lighthouses, ships in the bay have often run aground on the sandbanks. They are a magnet for grey seals. Apparently, 100 years ago, hundreds of thousands of these sea mammals lived here. At the end of the 1990s, there were just 1,500 of them left. When hauling fish, grey seals can dive 140 meters for up to 20 minutes and even catch notoriously fast salmon in the process. Each one of the more than 2-meter long and up to 300 kilogram heavy seals eats around 10 kilograms of fish per day. Fishermen therefore almost wipe them out as unwelcome competitors. The wreck in the Bay of Riga could be seen as a kind of compensation. The seals' popular meeting place is a sunken fish trawler. In the end, the fishermen have supplied their old rivals with a place in the sun. Since the seals are no longer hunted, they have propagated well. Now, more than 30,000 grey seals populate the coasts of the Baltic Sea, the world's youngest ocean. This second episode immerses us into a world comprising tens of thousands of islands between Estonia, Sweden's Gotland, and the Finnish Archipelago Sea. Saaremaa is one of more than 1,500 Estonian islands, and the country's largest. At the southern tip, the 52-metre-high Survey lighthouse towers over the Baltic Sea, whose beaches to the south of Saaremaa are pebbly and flat. In the north, the impressive Panga Cliff, a more than 20-metre-high and more than 400-million-year-old limestone wall. Thanks to countless bays, the island's coast is 1,300 kilometers long, and to this day, almost unspoiled. Because Saaremaa was once a prohibited Soviet military zone. In September, the elk rutting season begins in the forests and moors of the island. The mating calls of the elk cow acoustically signalize to the bull her readiness to mate. But her smell also implies the same. Often, the female scrapes off the bark of trees and marks them with a secretion. When flaming, the bull perceives the smell of her sexual hormones. He then lifts his upper lip to be able to smell her properly. In the roof of his mouth is a special olfactory organ. Timing is important for both sexes, as the elk cow is only fertile for 30 hours. The bull sniffs time and again, searching for the right moment. Should he miss it, the next possibility to mate would be 4 weeks later. But the cow is not ready. She still suckles the calf born to her this year. It will be weaned when the mother is pregnant again. Another bull brushes off the velvety tissue, hanging in bloody shreds from his antlers. When the rutting season begins, the headdress is ready. The velvet then perishes. To be able to produce so much bone substance each and every year is an enormous physical feat, especially as the antlers of a large bull can weigh 20 kilograms. The time is right the very next morning. At first, the elk cow runs off. But the bull refuses to leave her side. Until his advances prove successful at last. The actual mating takes but a few seconds, but will be repeated as a precaution. He is clearly too late. But there are many other cows at the rutting ground which one can smell and adhere to until they are ready and willing. The island of Saaremaa is the fourth largest in the Baltic Sea. It was once a wealthy trade centre. The castle in Kuressaare was built in the 14th century and is one of the best preserved forts of the Middle Ages in the entire Baltics. Seal researchers Mart Jussi and Hilmar Lipp take an hour to travel from Kuressaare to a few tiny islands in the Bay of Riga. March. In the past, the sea was mostly frozen over at this time of year. Winters now are often warmer, and the grey seals have but a few shingle islands on which to bring their offspring to the world. Normally, the babies are born in pack ice. This is why they have creamy white fur, which once camouflaged them perfectly. Nowhere else in the Baltic Sea are more grey seal babies born than on these tiny islands. For years now, scientists arrive here regularly for the count. How many newborn are there? How many survive the initial weeks? And how many die? In 2016, more than 2,000 young seals saw the light of day here. It sounds like a lot, but that makes 1,000 seals less than last year. The researchers want to discover what influence the warm winters and the absence of ice has on the propagation success of the seals. Seal babies that are born prematurely ostensibly have the best chances. They are already 4 weeks old and are losing their white baby fur. Those born later are at a disadvantage. Because the researchers set up cameras, they know that the little ones on the island are permanently on the move. Constant quarrelling costs energy. Each baby laid on the frozen sea on its own. Now, the mother, who has just returned from fishing, has to look hard amongst many for her child. Because all of the little seals are hungry, returning mothers attract the attention of many babies. They are followed by hungry youngsters, all of them hoping that it could be their own mother. This is exhausting and debilitating for all involved. As when suckling, both mother and child want to be undisturbed. The fluffy baby fur is designed for minus temperatures, but on the beach, the needle points significantly over zero. Because the warm winter causes the young seals discomfort, they cool off in water. The babies can swim and dive from birth. In the first weeks of their lives, they only go into the sea when they are disturbed or a storm is brewing. The reason? Their fur is not waterproof. Only adult fur is water repellent. This means that the little ones cool down faster and use energy that they really need for growth. In warm winters, the young grey seals are therefore weaker and more of them die than usual. almost 95% survive on the ice. Of the youngsters that are born on the islands, just 2/3 make it. This is a consequence of climate change. Diseases are also transmitted faster on the tiny islands. Three weeks after the birth of the young, the grey seal's mating season begins, and with it, the season of the big battles. All over the beach, the bulls argue over territories. A fully grown male can weigh more than 1/4 of a ton. Thick folds of neck skin are supposed to protect him from a rival's bites. But most of them have fresh wounds on their bodies. And scars from past disputes. The bulls reach sexual maturity at the age of 4 or 5. But it is not until they are 8 that they are strong enough to conquer a group of females. Yet only 1/5 of all youngsters are fathered by the victors of such fights. The dominant bulls have the biggest harem. Sometimes up to 10 females on the beach. But in the water, weaker bulls are simply waiting for a favorable opportunity, and it's from them that a large part of the newborn animals derive. The colossi can be astoundingly gentle. Many small islands further and 200 kilometers to the west, the remnants of an ancient coral reef protrude from the sea. Sweden's Gotland is the second largest island in the Baltic Sea. Like Estonian Saaremaa, it largely consists of over 400-million-year-old chalk plateaus, which developed from corals that then grew in warm seas as Gotland and Saaremaa were located on the equator. Golden eagles breed in the sparse forests, not on rocks, certainly not on gold as the name would imply, but in trees. Gotland is eagle land. 55 pairs breed on an area that is just slightly bigger than that of Luxembourg, more than anywhere else in Europe. Summers on the Sunshine Island, as the Swedes call Gotland, are more Mediterranean than they are Nordic. Rabbits, too, that initially came from the Mediterranean region, feel good here. Despite being a golden eagle's main prey. Rabbits live in colonies, and if necessary, warn one another. When attacked, they stamp with their hind legs on the ground, so that everyone can hide in the rabbit holes. Not all of them are fast enough. Apart from rabbits, Gotland's eagle chicks are also served squirrel and even hedgehog. The food is first split into bite-sized morsels. 7 weeks after hatching, they can prepare the prey themselves. Eagle females are significantly larger than their male counterparts. Both of them take care of their offspring until he finally becomes independent and flies over Gotland. The landscapes of the island are of prehistoric origin and characterized by limestone. Sometimes the lakes glow turquoise over white chalk. The chalk slabs, hard as cement, offer few, if any, plant stability and nutrition. On the coasts stand 40-meter-tall cliffs of ancient coral rock, full of fossils. Shells of prehistoric squid, mussels and snails. The calcareous and nutrient-poor soil of the island is ideal for orchids. Some 35 species flourish on Gotland. Marsh orchid, lady's slipper. Its blossom is an insect trap. Due to the smooth walls, insects can find just one way out again and in doing so, pollinate the treacherous plant. A rarity also blooms on Gotland's meadows, Orchis spitzeli. North of the Alps, this orchid only grows here. The collared flycatcher also has an odd area of distribution. The migratory bird breeds south of the River Main in Germany, and then again on Gotland. Both orchid and flycatcher benefit from a traditional form of management. To this day, tree branches are sawn off and used as a winter food for livestock. The sparse wooded meadows are especially rich in species. But the exotic turquoise sheen is destroying idyllic Gotland. Since time immemorial, limestone has been used as a building material. In the meantime, up to 50-meter deep chalk layers, like here in Kappelshamn, are being industrially quarried. Further mining sites are planned, even there where national parks have been earmarked. A 45-minute boat ride to the west of Gotland is Store Karlsö. The 2.5 square meter large island is, after Yellowstone, the world's oldest nature reserve. Razorbills lay a solitary egg in a crevice as of the end of May. Over a month-long period, the parents alternate breeding duties. Per Arvid Berglund photographs and counts the razorbills on behalf of the Baltic Seabird Project. "7,500 pairs breed here. Store Karlsö is the largest bird rock in the Baltic Sea. Apart from razorbills, 14,000 pairs of common guillemots inhabit the steep cliffs. Thanks to their powerful beaks, The razorbills are simple to distinguish from the guillemots with their sharp beaks. Both belong to the auk birds and resemble the penguins of the southern hemisphere in looks and way of life, but can also fly. After roughly 4 weeks, the razorbill chicks have hatched in the rock crevices. They remain there for a further 2.5 weeks and enjoy the fish their parents catch for them. They live relatively safe and apart from one another. Not so with the guillemots. Up to 20 pairs often breed on an area the size of a bath towel. They lay their pear-shaped egg on the sheer rock. This sparks interest. The hooded crow conducts a foray. Protectively, the guillemot parents stand in front of their brood. But the crow simply tears them away. The neighbors support one another, but at one point, a guillemot rolls himself like an egg from the rock. The crow was too slow, and a gull benefits. The crow grabs the next adult bird from the cliff. And ends its foray successfully. The breeding birds are constantly attacked on the cliffs, but all the neighbors together attempt to shield the brood. The parents have to leave the rocks regularly to hunt for food for their chicks in the Baltic Sea. Large swarms of sand eels don't only attract guillemots. Razorbills and gulls also benefit from the rich fishing grounds. Guillemots seem to be able to fly through the sea. Their dives last up to 3 minutes. When they return home following a successful catch, they hold the bagged sand eel lengthways in their beak and not crosswise, so that the neighbors can't pilfer the fish so easily, and that it lands where it should, for the hungry chicks. Back to Gotland, where on an area 3 times the size of Berlin, just 57,000 people live. A cultivated landscape with grazing land, farmhouses, and the old Hanseatic town of Visby. With its old churches and the mighty ring wall around the historic town centre, Visby is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The island even boasts its own race of sheep. Gotland sheep are considered robust and weather-resistant, ideal for the nutrient-poor chalky soil on which farming is hardly possible. Their wool, with its ringlets, is especially soft. Snow hares were most probably set out on the island long ago by humans. There, where modest sheep just roam free and create dry grasslands, is an ideal habitat for the hares. And the northern wheatear, who rears his young between the rocks. Just off Gotland's cliffs are many flat islands, also made of limestone. And far too small for settlements. The Caspian terns, the world's biggest sea swallows, find a safe breeding place on the islands. With a wingspan of almost 1.5 meters, they are almost as large as herring gulls. Once a year, they lay 2 to 4 eggs in a flat recess in the sand. Even when the first young have hatched, the parents remain sitting, 3 weeks on each egg. "60 pairs breed on the island. It is obvious that the birds are precocial. The parents bring one fish after another. Only sometimes they seem to have lost the feeling for just how much is enough for a chick. Life in the colony would be sublime if it were not for the neighbors. For some, a meter gap is just simply not enough. And should the youngsters have yet again escaped from the domestic recess, many a swallow doesn't know what to do with the fish. Until a swan throws everyone into a dither. Normally, the hustle and bustle confused its attackers. But this time, it was just a false alarm on the sea swallow island. Waves and wind permanently gnaw at the limestone. They slowly dissolve it. The surf works with force along the entire coast of Gotland and hollows out the chalk cliffs, causing them at some time to break away. Therefore, steep edges line the shores of the island. The coast is crumbling, emaciated by the forces of erosion. Only a few especially hard limestone blocks defy the weathering. They are the Rauka, bizarre rock formations shaped by the Baltic Sea for 10,000 years. Below, the sea simply eroded the rock's bases, leaving it as slim as a model's foot. And the top, a wide head. This is how Gotland's limestone figures evolved, some of them 10 meters tall, and fire the imagination, especially at sunset. It's June on the Stora Karlsö bird rock. The climax of the guillemot year has arrived. The chicks have grown significantly, and the parents refuse to bring them food to the rock. It's time for them to leave their place of birth. The chicks can't fly yet. Nonetheless, the parents still encourage the youngsters to jump off of the 45-meter-high rock. Some mothers with more than just gentle force. With a bit of luck, the free fall ends in the water. From here, the father calls. The little guillemot can swim immediately and follows his dad out into the open sea. The guillemot jump on Stora Karlsö is an attraction for bird watchers and is fully booked months in advance. Each evening, lots are drawn to determine who is allowed on the beach. The winners help the biologists attach rings to the birds. At dawn, it's all systems go. This way, they are more protected against enemies, such as gulls. Guillemots leap from all over the rocks. This night alone, the bird friends weigh more than 700 chicks. In 2016, over 4,400. The youngsters are living crumple zones. Thanks to their frizzy feathers and built-in airbags, they don't injure themselves. The first guillemots were ringed here too, back in 1913. At 43, the world's oldest known guillemot also received its ring here on Stora Karlsö. Back at the beach, the ringed chicks are set free. and immediately begin to call their fathers. He is already waiting, with many other guillemot fathers, to swim with the chicks to the southern Baltic. There, the waters are shallow and full of fish. The mothers stay behind, while the little ones will not return for 4 years. There, where 3/4 of all guillemots in the Baltic Sea breed, on the bird rock of Storakazu. 300 kilometers north of Gotland, there are tens of thousands of flat and rocky islands and islets. The inner skerries, close to the mainland, are wooded and sometimes inhabited. The outer skerries comprise mostly of bare rocks in the Baltic Sea. Some 50 to 80,000 islands are located between Sweden and Finland, depending on what one identifies as an island. Bengtskär is Finland's southernmost inhabited island, with a lighthouse that warns of the many rocks, and in the summer, a hotel. Then, many grey seals wander from the coasts of Estonia to the Archipelago Sea that abounds in fish. The young animals, born this winter, are meanwhile independent and go off hunting alone. For the adults, now the scratching season begins. They itch all over, or rather, the skin beneath the skin. The seals change their fur and then love nothing more than snoozing in the sun. Their skin is well circulated in order to provide them with nutrients for the regrowth of the new fur. If they were to stay in the water the whole day, because of the hair change, they would lose too much warmth and risk cooling down. Irrespective of its size, every single island is therefore occupied. Even though there are many rocks, competition for an island in the sun is huge. Some seals try it on with obtrusiveness and constant tail tweaking. The seal on the rock can now plan, do, or say what it wants. The one in the water gets on her nerves. And is eventually successful. As if there weren't enough stones or islands in the Baltic Sea. Some are polished completely round from the glaciers of the Ice Age. In many, frost and water have formed small hollows, in which black guillemots rear their brood. They are also auks. But contrary to the common guillemot, they don't breed in colonies and are relatively antisocial. Alone or in small groups of maximum a few dozen, they have their nests close to the sea surface. This one has bagged an eel pout in shallow water. The black guillemot gets away with loosely dangling his catch, as he has no neighbours who could tear it out of his beak. The mostly 2 chicks from a clutch wait well concealed until the parents call. Dinner at last. Then a little patience is necessary until the parents return with another tidbit. On the inner skerries with the old, dense pine forests, the white nights are a cause of enchantment. It's still daylight, even at 10 in the evening. Yet still, the great grey owl, the largest in Europe, needs his auditory senses for hunting. Thanks only to his sensitive ears, he can even hear the quietest rustling. Summertime is breeding season. The chicks have already hatched. Always hungry. Can I have some more? A little bird on the menu makes a change. That keeps the old birds on the go. The larger chicks sit on branches outside of the nest, but are still taken care of. The parents seem to be open all hours. The main prey, field voles. The branch dwellers are served with food for up to 3 months after leaving the nest, if they want it. But if they're not hungry, then their siblings are in for a treat. The youngsters of any given couple are all different sizes. Great grey owls lay their eggs in intervals of several days, but begin breeding immediately. The chicks, therefore, do not hatch at the same time, but they grow quickly, and after around 2 weeks, they have increased their birth weight tenfold. After 4 weeks, they become branchlings. Aged 5 months, they leave their parents' territory forever. The Finnish Archipelago Sea. A labyrinth of thousands of islands. More than 200 of them belong to the Archipelago National Park. Some of them are so big that there is room for Europe's biggest predator. A female brown bear on an outing with her cubs of the previous year. Bear young often spend their first 3 years with the mother. In sparsely inhabited Finland, bears are well protected and live from the Russian border to the coast. They strike down their prey with their paws and long claws, as well as digging caves, or just keeping their eyes closed when sleeping. The biggest predators are omnivores, which means they also graze or search for sweet berries. Their most important sensor is the nose. Brown bears can smell food from miles away. Or conspecifics. Deadly peril is about. A male bear. Those looking for a partner spell danger for the offspring. Mother bear warns her cubs. If he killed her youngsters, she would be fertile again in a few days, and he could become father. Another good use for paws with claws. If things did turn out bad, the little ones have to be able to climb to the highest treetops. An adult brown bear is too heavy, would not be able to follow them. The male bear has picked up the scent of an even bigger rival. The younger one has respect and just toddles off. The mother seizes the opportunity. They are in safety. At least, as long as the males keep one another busy. Another female has significantly smaller cubs with her. They were born just a few months ago. Without attracting attention, she quickly grabs her offspring and leaves the island. The mother swims first. And the little bears bring up the rear. Together, they cross the narrow waterways of the Finnish Baltic. And thus, make it from scary to scary. Through a sea of many thousands of islands, created in the Baltic Sea during the last ice age. This third episode takes us to the Gulf of Bothnia, roughly the same size as Slovakia, yet the least known region of the Baltic Sea. The Gulf of Bothnia is frozen over at the end of February. A white ocean, roughly 300 kilometers long and 150 kilometers wide. The ice shield, up to 1.20 meters thick, covers the entire north of the Baltic Sea. But one animal makes it through. The ringed seal keeps breathing holes free. After common seals and grey seals, it is the third type of seal in the Baltic Sea. Roughly 10,000 animals live in the northern region. With the strong claws on their front fins, they regularly scrape out breathing holes and extend them to prevent them from freezing over. Ringed seals need the ice to survive, because this is their nursery. The baby was born in the middle of winter in a protected cave, which the mother dug out of a snowdrift in the pack ice. With access to the sea, of course, so that the mother can suckle her baby after the hunt. She has laid out an entire system of exits in the icy subterranean labyrinth. It is still not entirely clear just how she finds her way around there. Ringed seals can dive for around 3/4 of an hour in depths of up to 300 meters to hunt for fish. But they too have to breathe sometime. Unlike in the Arctic, where ice bears and polar foxes lurk, ringed seals are relatively safe on the Baltic ice. At the most, a sea eagle with a wingspan of 2.5 meters and strong claws could grab a baby seal. This is too big for him. It still flees to be on the safe side. The eagle has other prey in its sights anyway. He's after a herring gull, which he corners and causes to panic. Until it finally spits out the fish that it has just caught. Tenacity and in-flight acrobatics eventually lead to the desired result. When the sun goes down in the winter months, it conjures colourful light games in the Baltic Sea sky. Northern lights glow when solar winds meet with the Earth's atmosphere. Sometimes the cosmic phenomena appear for hours. But at times they disappear within mere minutes. The northern part of the Baltic is iced over from mid-October right up to May. In the Gulf of Bothnia, the salt content registers just 0.5%. This is why the water freezes more quickly than in other regions of the Baltic Sea. Many rivers flow into the sea here and sweeten it. Like the 400-kilometer-long Tornio, probably Europe's longest natural river. Just 80 kilometers south of the Arctic Circle and close to the estuary, it forms the border between Sweden and Finland. The rapids of Kukkolaforsen do not freeze over in the winter either. The river therefore remains free from ice in certain places, even at temperatures up to -30 degrees. That's why the otter can hunt here, and how he can even live in this icy region. His fur comprises around 50,000 hairs per square centimetre, more than 400 times more than in a human being. This protects the otter from cold and moisture in the icy water. Under the ice, he can dive for long distances and remain underwater for 5 to 8 minutes. He needs open water to draw breath. Here on the River Tornio, he doesn't have to keep the air holes open himself. As he loses a lot of warmth during the hunt, despite his dense fur, the exuberant animal needs up to 1 kilogram of food daily: fish, crabs and other aquatic animals. Thanks to the rapids, yet another diver lives close by the Arctic Circle. The white-throated dipper. After a short dive, it returns to the ice with caddis fly larvae. While the otter rolls around in the snow to dry his fur, it grabs hold of the next larvae that it skillfully removes from its protective pouch and gobbles it down. The diving songbird and the restless water marder both find food in the cold season in the River Tornio. That soon meets in a delta full of islands, connected with one another in the winter by the solid ice. It is the northern end of the Baltic Sea and the south of Lapland. Landscape characterized by open coniferous forests, the home of reindeer. Close to the Baltic coast, the snow in winter is not as high as it is further inland. This makes life easier for the deer than it was in the mountains, scraping food free with his wide hooves, primarily lichens and moss. Like snowshoes, the hooves distribute the weight and prevent them from sinking too deeply. They are not wild reindeers, but the Sami's half-wild, roving domestic animals. They have markings on their ears or wear collars that show who the owner is. Each winter, the reindeer breeders bring their herds to the lower levels of the coast. They have to search for food themselves. They often take off across the ice of the Baltic, from island to island, and pass by settlements on their search for new feeding grounds. They even scratch around under birdhouses for seeds in people's front gardens. But the deer remain timid. Whenever a sledge comes close, they disappear in the vastness of the coniferous forests on Lapland's coast. 300 kilometers south of Lapland, lies the Kvarken Archipelago. Here too, the Baltic is covered in ice. And in between, deposits from primeval glaciers, corrugated like enormous washboards, jutting out from the sea. The scary Sea of Kvarken is known to be especially rich in fish. This is why Finland's west coast is so popular, even in winter. Visa Heinonen and Jukka Vita have laid out some bait. A white-tailed sea eagle scrutinizes each step they make. They reopen the hole in the ice with a shovel and a drill. Nothing new for the eagle. Ice fishing in temperatures of below 20 degrees is a national sport in Finland. The two men bring in the long twine on which they'd attached a lure and a net. And pull out a pike out of the Baltic Sea. The eagle has to be patient. It's not his turn until the men leave after a successful bout of fishing. Like almost everywhere else, due to pollutants and hunting, sea eagles almost became extinct in Finland too in the 1970s. A few had managed to survive in the Kvarken Archipelago. Nowadays, in the summer, around 35 couples breed here. Sometimes in the winter, as many as 300 eagles have been spotted. But they cannot hunt on the frozen-over Baltic Sea. They would normally migrate to ice-free waters further south. Leftovers from the ice anglers and especially created food points help the eagles and other birds through the winter. And still they quarrel. In most places, the Kvarken Archipelago is completely frozen over. But sometimes, currents between the thousands of islands keep water areas open. In these areas, dozens of swans spend the winter as they find their main source of food here, water plants. Mute swans and the slightly smaller whooper swans. After being hunted in the 1950s, Finland's national bird almost became extinct. Today, in the spring, their trombone-like calls can once again be heard. Pairs stay together all of their lives. They renew their bond each spring with a synchronized, expressive dance on the water. In the meantime, almost 7,000 whooper swan pairs nestle in Finland. In the past decades, the mute swans first settled in numbers in the north of the Baltic Sea. At the end of March, the first frozen surfaces break apart further out to sea. Near to the coast, bays and lagoons are still iced over, as are many rivers. As of the middle of April, temperatures rise above freezing point, and the Kvarken Archipelago transforms into a mosaic of islands, lakes and swamps, and a great migration begins. Most of the fish in the Kvarken Archipelago are of the freshwater variety. They can only survive because there is so little salt in the north of the Baltic Sea. For their propagation, however, they require pure freshwater. This is why perch and roach leave the sea and head for the river estuaries, which are now full of meltwater, to spawn. Pikes follow them. The perch immediately position their spiny dorsal fins to appear larger in the face of these predators. Pikes, too, spend most of the year in Baltic Sea water, but in the spring they leave for the rivers or lakes behind the coastal line to spawn. This narrow channel connects one of these lakes with the sea. When the sun goes down, the freshwater migration begins. The fish masses attract hunters. They come from the air. And lurk on the water. Great crested grebes, gulls, sea swallows. Even large, more than a metre-long pikes worm their way through the stony bottleneck to their spawning grounds. They attempt the passage with a strong tail stroke. Those that go astray in the process don't make it so close to their goal. Those that make it to the other side are already expected. sea eagles and gulls, crows and cranes. The ringed eagle has known this place for more than 20 years. Many of the fish are exhausted. They die, or are at least easy prey. Even for cranes, who normally live from seeds and insects, but here can tear apart a big pike with their sharp beaks. The time of spring feelings ends fatally for many. Despite all of their losses, the propagation of sufficient fish is always ensured. This is extremely dangerous for male pike, as the significantly bigger females are also quite keen on smaller conspecifics as prey. Fortunately for the males, the females have a bite inhibition whilst mating. Several males court one particular her, but only one of them comes into play per spawning procedure. The complete pairing takes hours. Pikes don't lay their eggs in one go. They do this in portions and in surges, altogether often more than 100,000. They adhere to leaves. This way they are not washed away, and in 10 days they develop into larvae in the oxygen-rich water. After just a few weeks, the mini pikes have grown several centimeters in length. The conditions are perfect. The shallow waters are full of nutrients, and they warm up quickly in the spring sunshine. A good day for a swim. And some prove just how contagious sheer joy can be. Okay, cranes dance the whole year long, but in the spring, they go into overdrive. Then, dancing together becomes a ritual, comprising jumping, wing flapping, and calling in a duet. A sign of cohesion for the coming breeding season in the Kvarken Archipelago. Here, one can see a very special phenomenon that also occurs in the Baltic Sea: land uplift. Until up to around 10,000 years ago, a 3-kilometre strong ice shield covered the area, the weight of which used to push the Earth's crust into the depths below. Then the glaciers melted, and the ground is still re-expanding. Up to today, it rises at a rate of roughly 1 centimetre annually. In 100 years, we are talking of almost 1 metre, and then these boathouses will be on dry land. In many parts of the Kvarken Archipelago, harbours have to be continuously moved, as due to the ground elevation, they have become unsuitable for shipping. This is why only special boats with a low draft navigate these waters. In 2,500 years, the islands will have risen so far out of the Baltic Sea that we will be able to walk from Finland to Sweden. In the forests along the northern Baltic, moose are not exactly a rarity. Nevertheless, in 2015, one of them hit the headlines in Finland. A moose cow died when it collided with a car. The consequence? The calf lost its mother. As an orphan, it would have no chance whatsoever. But it is brought to Markku Harju, who takes care of injured animals. He calls the moose calf Mervi, and Mervi soon gets to wander around Marcus's property as free as a bird. Before long, the two of them are inseparable. Bringing up moose babies with a bottle rarely works. It's difficult to obtain the correct milk. Mervi suffers from acute diarrhea, but the little fellow is tough. And the two of them are enjoying the joint summer break. Mervis seems to really like the reeds on the Baltic Sea beach. The story of the two friends moves the whole of Finland, and Mervi becomes a little star. For quite some time, it remains unclear whether the moose calf will make it. But in the spring of 2016, Markku takes this photo. One of Europe's rarest animals also lives in the Finnish forests. At first sight, it looks just like a common squirrel. In Europe, they can only be found in Estonia and Finland. The animals mostly spend the day in abandoned woodpecker holes. In the spring, however, they are also diurnal, in their own special way. By using skin flaps, flying squirrels are able to fly distances of up to 35 meters. It's mating time, and the flying squirrels are looking for suitable partners. The female has already found a nursery for her offspring. She rubs her scent from cheek glands onto branches. And sets marks with Yuri. Interested males give this cocktail a good sniff. And if he likes the smell, he really is after her. After 4 weeks, between 2 and 4 young flying squirrels will be born in the protection of the tree hollow. The Kvarken Archipelago and its thousands of islands is an ideal breeding ground for birds. Especially for those who breed on the ground. as predators like foxes find it difficult in so much water. To steal a small goose, or to pilfer an egg from a gull's island nest. But when the redshank issues a warning, it means something. A hooded crow is approaching a mew gull's nest. While one parent broods, the other is on sentry duty. This is also necessary. Hooded crows are skillful nest robbers that never miss a moment of negligence. They're stubborn too. The other gull arrives in support. Hardly banished, the crow returns and attacks once again. Until the bird is chased away by an entire squad of gulls, while the first chick hatches in the nest. In the end, the crow actually is successful. And clears off into the bushes with her prey, where the gull cannot follow. Now, even the clamoring of the gulls is to no avail. In the meantime, the cranes also have offspring in their nest, safe from foxes on an island in the swamps. The chicks still hide in the warm plumage of the parents. They don't need to go far to find food. There are insects all around the nest. Like this dragonfly larvae. And another. The chick is but a few hours old and has an appetite for 4. Idyllic family life, close up and in a way very rarely seen. While the parents keep the nesting grounds in their sights, they don't see that the older chick is maltreating its younger sibling. Sometimes the small bird is crowded out of the nest as if a competitor, despite there being enough to eat. When small cranes grow in size, they search for food together with the parents. Then they all wade through the swamps. And should the water get too deep, the stalking birds become swim birds. Just like the swan family. From the flat world of the Kvarken Archipelago and Finland's last outpost, it is no more than roughly 20 kilometers across the sea. Then distinctive rocks protrude on the Swedish side. Some are 150 meters tall. Many consist of red granite, which is typical of the region. The place is called Högakusten. The so-called high coast is full of deep canyons, tranquil mountain lakes and moors that lay high above the Baltic Sea. Brown bears live here. A male has picked up the scent of a female bear and is following her. In the summer, bears happily cool off in more lakes, but as they are mostly loners, greetings can be quite unfriendly. Right next door, someone is adamant the territory is his. A red-throated diver. The male bear has had enough. She was probably not yet ready. At last, peace falls over the moor. Time to go diving undisturbed. For fish or fresh lily pads. A small red-throated diver swims, full of expectation, to his parent. And while his chick sibling makes do with an insect, he is served with a big, fat, tasty fish. Another female bear appears. The male bear picks up her scent, an enticingly odorous trail. It seems as though she is willing to mate. When the two meet, things move pretty fast and furious. With no growling nor snarling. At the beginning of next year, she will give birth. We mostly talk here of 2 to 3 per litter. And soon, each of them go their own separate ways in the moors of the Högakusten, high above the Baltic Sea. Nowhere else is the land uplift as prominent as it is here in the Squirrels National Park. This is where the Earth's crust was pressed down deepest by the weight of the glaciers. After the ice melted, these screes once formed the Baltic Sea shore. Since then, they have risen higher than anywhere else. The current shores are around 200 meters deeper and evoke the impression of how the cairns above must have looked 9,000 years ago. Setterberg is a nature scout in Skoleskogen National Park. He once roamed through the forests and hunted moose. In the meantime, he no longer follows them with a rifle. The photographer is still impressed by Sweden's national animal. One should always be alert of moose. They appear cute, slow and cozy. But watch out when they feel harassed. Keep well away from a raging moose. Upset or angry moose cows have been known to trample people to death. But this one allows another photo. Agne is satisfied. In the Skerry Garden, off of the high coast, lies another work of land uplifting. The island of Trusunda evolved out of 3 islands. The villages on the Skerries were once only inhabited in the summer. Fishermen used to sail from here to catch herrings. To this day, the Baltic off the high coast is full of fish. This attracts several seabirds to the Skerries. Today, on the abraded islands, western curlews rest. And eider ducks breed. Surprisingly, many Swedes don't know of the attractive drake at all. The main reason being that they only come in spring for the mating season on the Huga coasts. Up to 10 males then compete for the approval of one female, who has an inconspicuous plumage. Quite the opposite of the males in their magnificent frocks, who, once successful, immediately leave the coast behind them again. But their cooing love calls can still be made out. The females lay their eggs in hollows in the scree of the Skerries that they have upholstered with the finest downy feathers. These are acknowledged to keep the birds especially warm. 4 weeks later, and the chicks have hatched. Their mothers soon lead them out onto the sea. Often, several duck parents with their flocks of chicks form a giant kindergarten. The little ones can swim almost immediately after hatching, and dive too. And it's not that easy to remain underwater when the air in the feathers keeps tugging the bird upwards. But with a bit of practice, it gets better and better. From the very beginning, the youngsters have to search for their food themselves, whilst diving. Little fish, crabs and later mussels on the seabed, the staple diet of the eider ducks. The only slightly salted water is fed in the north of the Baltic Sea, to this day, from glaciers, many of which lay off Sweden's border with Norway. Here is the source of countless smaller streams that unite to become ever bigger rivers and surge toward the Baltic coast. The reindeer spend the warm season on the plateaus of Lapland. They move upwards to the cooler regions to escape the mosquito plague of a Scandinavian summer. The River Tornio also has its source in a small glacier in Lapland and flows from there to the estuary and the Baltic Sea. In the summer, the rapids of Kukkeleforsen are a popular rafting area. The untamed river has more attractions to offer. It is the most important salmon river that flows into the Baltic. Fishermen are waiting everywhere for the salmon. Everyone has his own method how to catch one. Some use rod and line, others use landing nets. At one point, stocks almost collapsed entirely. Today, thanks to strict regulations, once again hundreds of thousands of salmon aim for the spawning grounds at the River Tornio, where in the summer, just 80 kilometers from the Arctic Circle, the sun barely sets. And where in the estuary delta of the river, moose make their way along the shore of a unique sea. The youngest in the world, with salty water in the west and fresh water in the northeast. The Baltic Sea, a child of the last ice age.